We've got new analysis this morning from the Tax Policy Center. It shows the White House's tax proposal could hit your wallet big time in the form of lower wages. Hiking the minimum rate on the corporate tax rate to 28% will hit the finances of lower and middle income taxpayers to the tune of $300. Joining me right now to talk more about that is Americans for Tax Reform President Grover Norquist. Grover, walk us through what you're getting from the Tax Foundation on the president's tax proposal. $300 over what period?
Well, the Tax Policy Center is a very liberal group. They understate how much of the corporate income tax is actually paid by workers and lower wages. The best estimates are more than 50% of the corporate income tax. So if you take a $2 trillion corporate income tax increase, which is what President Biden wants, $1 trillion of that over about 10 years will be paid by people in lower wages. We saw the opposite of that when Republicans cut the corporate income tax, and you saw in 2019 alone, the median income wage went up by $4,000 in 2019. That's a 6.8% increase in the median wage. Why? Because companies invest more, they make their workers more productive, they pay them more. That's what happened when you cut the corporate rate. The opposite of that is what happens when you increase the corporate rate, and even a liberal economics group admits that this is going to be very damaging for middle-income people. This is Biden hitting the middle class with a tax hike.
So you're saying pretty much when corporations are forced to pay a higher tax rate, they're either going to have employees pay that cost or customers pay that cost by keeping a cap on wages?
Well, two things happen. You raise prices. So you see prices go up for consumers. To the extent that you reduce what you pay owners, people's 401ks and IRAs become worth less. That's 53% of American families have a 401k or an IRA. You will see your life savings go down. But the reason workers get paid less is that companies, if they have less money to invest in computers and trucks and equipment, less capital per worker, you can tell how much somebody's going to get paid based on how much capital per worker is spent. That's why people in America earn more than people in Bangladesh. They're not nicer. They have more capital per worker, more investment per worker. It makes them more productive. They get paid more. Take that money away, people are less productive.
So your company releasing a letter supporting the Ensuring Economic Recovery Act, which would look into raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, Grover. How does raising the minimum wage impact small business?
Well, we already know, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne from Texas has put forward legislation to require a study on just this question. The CBO has done a study in the past, and in the past they said it would kill, taking the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, which is what the left wants to do, would kill 1.3 million to 3.7 million jobs. That's how many jobs would be lost. When the minimum wage was first put in under FDR, it was hundreds of thousands of jobs that were destroyed back then because you just make it illegal to hire some people who aren't yet as productive as they'd like to be or would be as they got older and better trained. This is we've seen this in Seattle, where people lost jobs. We saw in New York, where they went to higher minimum wage, 75% of restaurants reduced hours and 50% laid people off. We know it kills jobs. Beth Van Duyne's study will find out how many.
Well, look, the administration is looking to find a way to pay for all of their pie-in-the-sky dreams. This green economy is going to cost money, and they're looking under every rock. Biden wants to send $80 billion to the IRS. This is part of his budget, to hire 87,000 new auditors so that they can find any taxes that weren't paid under every rock. Your thoughts on what Biden is hoping to do in his budget with the IRS? Some people say this is, once again, politicizing the IRS.
We know that the IRS makes political decisions. They recently told a group that because they were Christians, they couldn't be non-tax deductible because Christians are Republicans. I mean, the IRS is making assertions like that. This is crazy. They killed the Tea Party movement by not allowing them to incorporate as not-for-profits. For a 3-year period, only one conservative group got the incorporation papers that normally you get without any problem at all. 3 years, they shut down the opportunity for conservative Tea Party people to organize across the country, and that's why the Tea Party movement disappeared. 97% of the union money contributed from the IRS union goes to Democrats. 97% of those union contributions from the IRS go to Democrats. This is a politicized agency. They want to give it more money. And what Biden's doing is an old trick. Pretend we're going to get 10 more agents. They'll raise this much money. We're going to spend it. They have tried this over the last 50 years. They never hit those targets. And in fact, the CBO and the Democrats, when the Democrats were in charge, they refused to let anybody score the way Biden wants to. They said, you don't get more money with more agents, at least not the ratios that they're talking about. So quit putting that in the budget as if it was a pay for. Biden's doing that.
Well, that budget is really a monster budget. I mean, you're talking about a $6 trillion budget in year one. Grover, let me switch gears. We've been talking about this antitrust package of bills. You have an op-ed in The Hill today about this antitrust package being a, quote, Trojan horse that conservatives must reject. Explain.
Yeah. Well, a lot of conservative groups and congressmen have pointed out that while it's understandable that conservatives are unhappy with some of the Google and Twitter and so on, to change the law for antitrust is not just to change it for a few companies, it's to change it for everybody, and would allow antitrust lawyers and the federal government to come in and play smash mouth with all sorts of companies. Before, Robert Bork said antitrust should only apply when there is consumer harm. If a company is doing something that hurts consumers, raising prices and having barriers to entry, then you look at antitrust. What the left wants to do is use antitrust to go after critical race theory, all sorts of various. They think you're too big, too small, too sideways. Opening up antitrust to how it was abused by politicians in the past would be a disaster. And we ought not to get fooled into doing that.
Well, Grover, it's funny because if you really want to know what the priorities of this antitrust package is, look no further than Commissioner Becca Slaughter's recent tweet. She tweeted about the need to use antitrust law to address systemic racism. Yes, she actually tweeted that. Antitrust. This is what their priorities are. They're not necessarily looking at this impact on the American people. They're talking about systemic racism throughout this government. Grover, it's good to see you this morning. We'll keep a spotlight on it. Thank you, sir. Grover Norquist. We'll be right back.